I actually resigned because I was not going to let her limitations of how she could see the growth for me and her company stop me from having the career growth that I knew I was capable of. You really can learn anything if you have the desire to. So everybody has an innate quality. I truly believe everyone has a purpose as to why they're here and what they're meant to do with their life. And they have choices every single day to decide whether or not you're going to dial that innate quality up or if you're going to ignore it and do something else that causes you pain. Your business is 100% a reflection of how you lead it. So it's the same. Your team is 100% a reflection of how you lead it. And if you feel that you are not responsible for the result, then you are actually wasting time and money in your people. I would ask you to check in with yourself and say, what lights you up? And if you can't answer that question, then you haven't exposed yourself to enough different areas.
You're listening to the Real Business Connections Network. Real Business Connections Network. Powered by Balbert Marketing, LLC. Subscribe now and check us out at realbusinessconnections.com. Enjoy the show.
Don't let the limitations of others become your own. And the reason why I share that with you is that limitations of others' expectations of me, the limitations of maybe a job, career path I was on in the past, limitations of even a relationship I was in, ended up creating a version of myself that was not true to me. And I kept repeating myself, okay, Kareen, like, are you making this decision based on someone else's limitations on you? Or their limitations, their fears of what you are desiring for yourself? And I realized if I just start the mantra of don't let the limitations of others become your own and come from a place of truth of what I know I'm capable of and what I desire, then that's the path for me.
It's powerful. I have like 15 examples in my head from my life. Well, what's an example of a time when you realized this was occurring?
So when this lesson was really apparent for me was when I hit a glass ceiling in the company I had joined at the age of 23. 23 is the start of your career. You shouldn't be hitting a glass ceiling or barriers or walls at the start. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
And I was busting my butt in that job to build a career and earn and prove myself. I was in that prove myself energy. And when I had this conversation with my boss at that time, a new manager had come into play. I had a meeting with her and I was like, hey, this is what I was hired for. This is all that I'm doing. I was literally on like 24/7 support. I had a pager. I mean, that's how much I'm dating myself back. Like you had to be paged to call in, and this is the beginning of my career life.
Yeah.
And I was exhausted. The job actually at one point sent me to the ER from the stress. Like I really was pushing myself to beyond my limits for this job. And when I had this meeting with her, I asked, well, what's the future for me? And she's like, well, I don't know what you're complaining about. She literally said the words complaining about. All I was doing was outlining all the things that I had been done. And she heard it as me whining, which I question. And then she said, just keep doing your job. That's your job. Just keep doing it. And I was like, wow. Okay. So if she doesn't see the value in me, she also doesn't see a path for me forward. Why would I let her limit how far I could take my career? And so that conversation was on a Thursday and I processed a lot over that weekend, had a lot of up, down emotion. And that Monday I actually resigned because I was not going to be, especially at the start of my career, and let her limitations of how she could see the growth for me and her company stop me from having the career growth that I knew I was capable of. And that was the first distinct lesson I had that I just became a mantra of mine. And growth was a huge value of mine at the time in the beginning of my career, where I had to join a company next where growth was a value of theirs.
What are you capable of? I want to do like 2 hours with you just going through. You're like a young, early 20s, and you're already like, I know I'm better than this. I'm out. What did you know you were capable of?
I had proven that I was more than what I was originally hired for because I kept taking on more responsibility. And I was very successful at it. Like one of the things for me too is that I I someone who just likes to throw spaghetti at the wall and see if it sticks. Like that's the entrepreneurial spirit that I've had, but I would do it in other people's companies at the beginning of my career because when it comes down to it, no one is really taught how to lead until you step up into leading and decide what works best for that environment. And I saw that really young. I was a leader in, high school years and all that stuff. Like I just have that, I think, natural ability. But to take an initiative, put some people together, and drive towards something was something that was just very natural for me. And I just dialed it up in my career life, which then, I literally went from a business analyst in the next job to a senior director of mergers and acquisition operations in 5 years. Like I just pushed at that time. And I was a sponge too. I would learn something, apply it, learn something, apply it, teach someone else, move on.
Well, you mentioned that you did have some natural capabilities.
Yeah.
What if I'm like, come on, hey, Kareen, I don't have none of that. Like, I'm not a natural. Like, am I just screwed?
No, you're not. Because you really can't learn anything
Yeah.
if you have the desire to. So everybody has an innate quality. I truly believe everyone has a purpose as to why they're here and what they're meant to do with their life. And they have choices every single day to decide whether or not you're going to dial that innate quality up or if you're going to ignore it and do something else that causes you pain. Basically is like the spectrum. So if someone is sitting and asking themselves, well, what is my innate gifting? Like what do I, need to hone in on to master and maybe add quality and value to other people? I would ask you to check in with yourself and say, what lights you up?
Hmm.
And if you can't answer that question, then you haven't exposed yourself to enough different areas of how to do things or what to learn or what to become an expert in. So I would say go test more, right? Get yourself out there. Go ask people who inspire you and or you aspire to be how they got there. What did they have to learn? How do they enjoy it? Why do they enjoy it, right? Because asking those questions are so key to then figure it out for yourself. And I've been on the self-development track from a very young age, which is why I can eloquently talk about where I am today and the journey that got me here. But let me tell you, when I was in it, no. Like when I wasn't sure about I'm looking in the rears and being like, oh yeah, growth was a strong value of mine, right? So I had to make sure that I picked the next company for growth. But while I was in it, I was scared of the big change I had made from resigning to go after and find the next job and the next check, right? Like it's not that it's innate without the concerns of what the outcome might be.
Yeah.
But it is something that I was willingness is that value that I think I lean into the most and still do today, where I was willing to at least expose myself to something new and then decide if it was for me.
Talk more about willingness because simple concept.
Yeah.
I'm willing to scrub the toilet. I'm
Yeah.
willing to do jobs that people are showing up at. Maybe they just got hired their first job. They're not, I've been working my whole career. I'm still willing to do it.
Yeah.
But I also don't
Willing,
want to be the guy scrubbing all the toilets.
right.
So there's a
But you're
balance
willing
there,
to
right?
if you had to, right? So willingness is knowing that it's almost like the ego is not in play when you're willing to step into something. It's about the learnings over the outcome. That's the way I look at willingness. I have a willingness to learn. I have a willingness to expose myself. I have a willingness to try. And if I don't like it, okay, well then how do I get myself out of it or someone else to go do that thing because I'm meant to go try something else and be something else, someone else. So to me, willingness is really letting go of the ego and stepping into learning and exposing yourself to the path ahead without those limitations, like, the beginning of this conversation, right? Because if you are sitting in a limited mindset or something that is blocking you, it's
Yeah.
probably because you haven't tapped into what are you actually willing to do to have that thing happen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So just because you're willing to do things, I was thinking like, well, I'm willing to do it, so I'm going to play small.
Mm,
You need to be willing to do it, but also you don't always have to do it.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I look at it. because the willingness to me gives me freedom to say, yeah, I'm willing. Of course, I'm willing to go clean my house. You said the scrub toilets thing. I'm
Yeah.
willing to do it if I had to. Is that the best use of my time? Right. And then I realized, well, my rate is quite high to be spending, the hours it would take to do that. So I would rather hire someone. And now I'm making a conscious decision as to where I'm spending my time and what I'm willing to invest in to help advance me forward. But I always sit in the willingness. Sure. Can I do it? Am I able to do it? Yes. Am I willing to step backwards in order to step forward? Sometimes, yeah, I had to, you know?
Mm.
And so I think it's a really cool value to lean into, especially as leaders. The willingness to not know the answer is really important if you're trying to move a team forward as well.
I'm wondering, because I mean, I know you're working with some of the top level C-suites, some of the best, most successful, biggest impact driven entrepreneurs out there.
Yeah.
Is there anything that they shouldn't be willing to do? Are there things that once you get to a certain level like this, as a leader, I need my team to handle this, or are they forever willing? Or what do you outsource and train versus what
Mm.
does the leader take on themselves?
Yeah. So I think it's the willingness to empower others to do what you are ultimately responsible for is the magic of high performing leaders, because it means that you still understand the pulse of what's going on and you still have oversight, you still have guidance, you still have as an escalation path, like you're still involved. I think where the breakdown happens is that once they delegate, they feel they're no longer responsible. And that's where I feel like we've had a lot of dysfunction across large teams and large initiatives and the way certain companies are run, because and even on an entrepreneurial path when you're just building up your team, you think you're bringing in the people that are just going to get it and do it without your oversight.
Sure.
And then you wonder why it feels so fractured and disconnected on the other side. So I think it's the willingness to know that sometimes you still might need to step in, which means you must have your finger on the pulse of what's actually happening as you're empowering your team and how they're growing going forward under your mission, right? Like there's still the tie-in as to why you're all there together.
So we're here together.
Yeah.
I'm empowering my team members. They know why we're here. You mentioned responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say team member A, B, and C didn't fulfill the task the way that was planned.
Yep.
Is that my responsibility as the leader? How's that
Yeah.
work? How do you handle that scenario?
Yeah, because another one of my quotes I always say is, your business is 100% a reflection of how you lead it. So it's the same. Your team is 100% a reflection of how you lead it. And if you feel that you are not responsible for the result, then you are actually wasting time and money in your people, because it is ultimately why you brought them in the first place, was to deliver against an initiative together. You invested in them and you want an ROI on that investment. When errors happen, which they do, when disappointment happens, which it does, when there's conflict, it's going to happen, right? It's still your responsibility as someone leading it to rein it in, get to the point of what is the fracture here. How are we going to mend it together and move forward together? I think what's happened in recent years is the pointing of the finger and the blame game is where the biggest fractures occur that it's really hard to recover from. Right. And then shaming is a big part. I've had to go unravel so many environments that were shame based and finger pointing and just making people feel super small when everyone's just showing up trying to do the best job possible. You have to decide how you're going to bring up the best out of everyone in very complex environments. Right. And I think that's the piece that more people need to feel ownership of and responsibility for, is that every single person on your team is a reflection of you. And if you're missing something, or if they're needing support in some way, that is the leader's responsibility to go in and identify and help them grow into who they're meant to be, or shuffle them out if it's not going to be a fit.
Not everyone's a perfect fit.
Oh, no. We all come in all different sizes. Shapes and forms.
I,
It's
I feel like we've had little nibbles. In a second, we're going to get a whole slice of pie, and then I want everyone to know how they can get the whole pie, the whole cake, because I feel like I could spend 8 hours with you and not get
yeah.
bored at all. So we've
There's
had
a
a
lot of
little
history
nibble
here.
here. I want to get a little bit of clarity, like an
Yeah.
entire slice. Give the listener, I like to call it an integration assignment because we're integrating, a small concept we learned. Then
Yeah.
in a second, you can go get the whole cake. We'll talk about how you can do that. But grab your
Sure.
pen and paper
Yeah.
if you're listening at home. Give us something we can do, like something
Great.
that we can take what we learned and start implementing it.
Yeah. So I love that you brought up the team dynamic of things, because one of these exercises that I always share with folks, it's called my retrospective exercise. And so if you have a piece of paper, I want you to draw a line down the middle and a line across the middle, like a 4-part grid
All
on your
right,
piece of paper.
I'm
Okay.
doing it.
Yeah. So
That's the
draw your
clicking
grid,
sound.
you know. And what this exercise does, now you could do it for yourself individually, right? Like if you're trying to check in on you and being like, why have I felt so overwhelmed? Why am I sitting in such stress about what I'm trying to accomplish? Why am I not hitting my goals? Whatever those questions are, this is what you want to first have in mind to solve for with this exercise. Okay. So it can be anything. If you have a team together, you can facilitate this also across your whole team. And this is a really great way, based on the fractures we just talked about. If you're trying to get to the root of the fractures in an empowered way, not in a shaming way, this is a really great exercise to use. Okay. So you have your grid. On the top left box, I want you to put a smiley face. And on that smiley face, the question there that you're going to ask yourself is, what is going really well? So one of the things about us overachievers or people who are in achievement stance is that we forget to celebrate, right? And so we want to take time to really list out what's going really well. Like, what are the things that have happened since the last time we checked in that is going amazing? We want to continue to see happen. We want to breathe life into. So you want to take some time and answer that first question to then move into the second question, because now you're in a high energy state. What do we need to stop doing? So that's the bottom left corner, and it's the minus sign on your grid. And that bottom left corner are the things that you need to stop doing that are distracting you from what ultimately you're trying to achieve, or the stance you're trying to have in life, or whatever it is that you came to ask these questions around. You want to say, what do you stop doing? I get a lot of the time when I run this as a monthly call. And a lot of the times people on the call are like, yeah, I got to stop procrastinating. I got to stop sitting in fear. Like it can even be an emotional stopping or emotional piece that will help inch you towards it. Or it could be an actual tactile thing. I got to stop investing in XYZ service because I'm not getting the return on investment and I want to reallocate it. Right. So whatever that looks like. So that's the bottom left corner. Top right corner then is a plus sign. And this is where you ask yourself, what do I need to start doing that is going to inch me towards what it is that I want to see happen? And when you're doing this across the team, it's so good because now this is innovative. This is ideation. These are the things that like, oh, okay, we had all these problems. Now, what are the ways we want to move forward? Right. And then the bottom right corner is the action step. So this is what is the one thing you're going to do in, like, let's say the next week, if you want to do this exercise weekly, or the one thing you want to do in the next 30 days that is going to inch you forward towards what you set your mind to continue doing, obviously, but what's the new thing? What's the tweak? What's the pivot maybe that has to happen in order for you to achieve what it is you desire? And this is why I call this exercise the retrospective, how to step into aligned action, because this is the number one exercise I've done week after week, especially when I launched my business and then wanted to hit 7 figures. I use this tool to check myself to make sure my team was in check, and like, so that we were growing in an aligned way with such clarity around the actions we take.
Do you have a symbol for the action step?
The action step, I just put, let's see, what, I don't think I have. I kept it blank and just wrote the word action.
You know what I just
on the
I just
worksheet.
did?
I'm thinking about my worksheet. Yeah. Because you can grab it if you go to heykareen.com/retro. I host facilitate it for people because sometimes they need the live coaching when they're feeling stuck. but also the worksheet. You get it. Join a
You know
call.
what I just wrote, and maybe you'll add it to the worksheet,
Tell
and
me.
then the listeners will see it.
Yeah.
I drew an infinity loop
Oh,
as
I
my
like
action step.
it.
And it's also a reminder to repeat this process. This is not a
Yes.
one-time ordeal, right?
Yes. I love the infinity loop. That's the way
So
I see money, by the way,
I love that.
as an infinity loop.
There's going to be lots of notes in the description, but what is the best way? I'm going to be doing this, by the way. So
Good,
tell me
good.
what I can do to continue to serve and support you.
Oh, you're so sweet. Yes. I mean, please join me on my monthly calls if you're able, because it's so much fun to interact this way and know what's actually going on with you. So feel free to do that. I launched my Hey Kareen app last year, which has centralized everything that I
Wow.
have done over the last 20 years in one place for everyone to
Wow.
take advantage of. But mainly cloning myself in AI so that you can have the direct coaching when I'm not available. Like she can support you is part of that. So as listeners want to download just go to heykareen.com and download that app. That would be amazing, because it's still new. We're getting feedback. We're making it better, so more users on it really helps us make it better for all of you. But joining me, on my weekly or my monthly, live calls is also fun, because it helps me tap into what are the challenges happening out there so I could create more content and more connection with everybody to make sure they're being served. Like, I really do feel like I have a heart of service and I don't know how to turn it off, but I want to do it in an aligned way that actually meets the need. So that's just going to heykareen.com/retro and signing up for the monthly calls. But that really helps not only support me as I build my community out, but also make sure that I'm giving back in the right way too.
It sounds like I can have Kareen in my pocket at any time, but if I need to say hello and get a little more accountability, there's a live call to do that too.
Exactly.
I got you.
Yeah.
I joked, like, I literally could talk to you 8 or 9 hours. I appreciate you coming on. We'll talk about having you back so we can go a layer deeper. But I appreciate the insight, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Ben. I loved our conversation.
We'll talk soon.